Rabbi Julie Greenberg. Rabbi Greenberg is the leader of Congregation Leyv-Ha-Ir, and they share this building with us. They just had their high holiday services a few weeks ago. Rabbi Julie is known as a wise and warm guide with a talent for innovation while holding fast to the valuable core of tradition. She lives and works in Philadelphia. Her home is in Mount Airy. She has a counseling practice on City Line Avenue and a congregation in Center City. As she develops relationships with each new individual or family, she is a resource for accessing the richness, possibility, meaning, and connection. And Rabbi Greenberg will be talking this morning on changing Philadelphia, one relationship at a time. And she will be answering questions for about 10 minutes at the end of her prepared remarks.
Well, let me start by saying I'm just delighted to be here. We are so grateful in Congregation Leyv-Ha-Ir, Heart of the City, to be sharing this beautiful space with your community. I think that this value, the place where we meet to seek the highest is holy ground, really starts right here, right now. And our community has deep affinity with the values of the Ethical Society. In fact, in a very personal way, my own great-grandparents were part of Felix Adler, the founder of the Ethical Society's original cohort in New York. And so they helped build the Ethical Society from the ground up. Many of my family members went to the Ethical Society school, the Field School in Fieldson School in New York. And I think that just ideologically, theologically, our communities have so much in common. In many ways, I think Reconstructionist Judaism, our brand of Judaism, could be called religious humanism. Because we believe that everything that happens on earth is because of human hearts and hands and brains. That's the humanist part of it. And we also believe in the mystery and awe and in the grace that is beyond what humans bring, and that's the religious part of it. So we, in many ways, have deep affinity with the Ethical Society. Now, as I begin to speak about education in Philadelphia, I want to let you know that I personally have been a parent in the Philadelphia public schools for 16 years, and will be again as my youngest daughter moves into public high school for the next 4 years. So with 5 kids, there's been a lot of years of education. And many of them have taken place in the public schools. You may have heard the rap song that pretty much sums up what's been happening in our public school system. It's a Kanye West song. The system's broken, schools closed, the prisons open. That about sums up what's been happening. Lots of money being invested in building prisons in the state of Pennsylvania, while the public schools are in real chaotic crisis year after year. I am not going to talk a lot about that crisis and about the problems, because you can listen to the news any day and you can hear about that. You can hear that in Lower Merion, students are receiving $13,000 more than when you cross the border. And look at the funding for a public school in Philadelphia, $13,000 difference per student if you just step across the city line. You can hear about one guidance counselor for 3,000 students. I'm not even really going to go into the problems because you know about the problems. What I'm going to talk about is what we're trying to do in Power, Philadelphians Organized to Witness, Empower, and Rebuild, to address these problems. So I'm going to focus more on possibilities here. In Power, we have a 3-pronged approach to these problems. And I'm going to talk about each of these 3 prongs. Number 1, we are interested in building power. so that we have a seat at the table to address these problems. That's the first prong. The second prong is we want to educate ourselves deeply and broadly about education in the city and in the state, and seek opportunities to actually make a difference at the policy level, so we can do some systemic change and not relive these same problems year after year. And number three, we want to find very local opportunities for hands-on making a difference in our local schools. So I'm going to start, one school at a time. I'm going to start by talking about what it means to build power. We have a model of building power that really is each one reach one relationship at a time. We build power through relationships. And we build power, we are a multi-faith movement across the city of Philadelphia, now branching out into the state of Pennsylvania. And at this point, we have 42 congregations across the city, every race, every geographic area, every religion. And like I said, we define religion very broadly. Everybody is welcome. And we're so excited at this point to have begun to include the large black churches, the African American churches. It's essential to have those churches in the network to have any political power in Philadelphia. So we now do include some of those churches, such as Bright Hope Baptist Church. And we work very closely with the Catholic Church. It's also important to have the Archdiocese involved if you want to make change in a city like this. So we're building power, one relationship at a time. Very exciting. I'm in the clergy caucus. We meet once a month. And we're building these deep relationships across these lines. Your leader has been coming to some meetings when he's able to. And it's just an exciting process, just literally to get to know each other and to start talking about these issues that are important to all of us. Number two, we have been educating ourselves for the last 3 years, we've existed for about 3 years, about the issues. We've met with multiple stakeholders all the way across the spectrum, charter school advocates and the School Reform Commission and City Council and every educational policy center, the Educational Law Center, the policy and budget people. I'm now arranging meetings across the state for the Union of School Superintendents and School Boards, 2 different organizations. The Teachers Union, we've all across the board, we've just been educating ourselves about who are the players, what are the issues, and where might there be an opportunity to make a difference. One thing we've discovered as we talk to hundreds and thousands of people who care about education is that everybody has intense feelings about education. If you think about it, all of us survived our educations, for better or worse. Many of us have had children in the schools. Many of us have been teachers or counselors or administrators in the schools. And we are very passionately connected to education. Not only that, but the values in both of our traditions, the Ethical Society tradition and certainly the Jewish tradition, call on education as a very key core of what we care about in the world. So many of us have such strong feelings about education that what we found in Power is that when we start to talk about education, there is just an outpouring of grief, despair, experience, ideas, and that's so important, and we need to really acknowledge that, but we also need to channel it into ways to make a difference and not get stuck at the level of rehearsing all the things that have gone wrong. So if you've had any experience talking to anybody about education, you will notice this same phenomenon, that what comes up is a long laundry list of our failures to educate our kids and all the things that go wrong. They need more nutritious lunches, and they need better male role models, and they need safety in the schools, and they need not to focus only on tests, and you could go on and on. But what we're really aiming for in Power is not just the laundry list of what doesn't work. We want to hold up possibilities for actually making a difference. During the High Holy Days, the overview of the sermons that I gave had to do with what does it mean to be Jewish in a global world. And I went very in-depth on what does it mean to be Jewish in relation to the earth and the crisis that it's in, and also in relation to race and the great crisis of race relations in the world. And those sermons are actually on our website. But the upshot of all of those sermons was that what it means to be Jewish in the global world on any issue that you're talking about is that you take the first step right here, right now, because the only action anyone can ever take is local, and that you work with other people, you band together with other compatible people. In the case of the Jewish community, unite with other Jewish people to move forward on these issues. And that's what it means to be a human being in a global world. Same thing I think is true on the issue of education. You gotta start with one step at a time, right here, right now. So part of what we've tried to do in this second kind of pillar of the work that involves educating ourselves and finding opportunity is to identify where is a place where we could possibly have an effective intervention to lift up this very broken system. And what we've come up with after lots of analysis and lots of research is that we are one of 3 states in the entire country that does not have a fair, full funding formula for the counties across the state of Pennsylvania, so that you can have this huge disparity between a school in Lower Merion and a school in the city. And we understand that money is not at all the only thing that is broken with the public school system. Obviously, there's a lot that's broken with the public school system. But money is a piece of it, and the money is so inequitable right now. And what we've learned in our research is that in order to have a fair funding formula, and also to pair that with new dedicated streams of income, you have to have really strong leadership at the state level. What we've learned is that the way schools are funded is in 3 different ways. There's property tax, and that's one reason for the huge disparities, because Philadelphia doesn't have very much property tax income because it's a very poor city compared to wealthy suburbs, which do have a lot more of an income stream from property tax. So that's one stream of funding for public schools. Another stream is at the federal level, there's some funding for public schools. But the biggest bulk of funding for public schools comes at the state level. 60% of what our students get comes from the state level. So if you can impact state funding, you've had a big impact on funding for public education. And we know that to have an impact on funding for public education, you have to have leadership at the state level, which means the governor. The governor has to lead on that issue through the legislature. Well, right now we have a governor who has actually defunded education by over $1 billion. But we happen to be moving into an election cycle for the governor, and that opens up an opportunity. You can't really make a change or have any impact on these things unless there is some opening where you can make a difference. We're very excited that we're stepping into an election cycle. And our goal is to lift up the issue of full, fair funding for education with a new and dedicated stream of funding to the top of the agenda of all of the candidates for governor. If any of you heard the news this week, we're just so excited to say that all the work we've been doing over the last many months of demonstrations and visiting candidates and writing letters and just real organizing work, one relationship at a time, has resulted in both Allison Schwartz and Tom Knox, who are running, obviously, in the Democratic primary to be chosen as the Democratic candidate for governor, put out, they had press conferences saying that their top issue in the election will be education. And that's because people like us said that's what we want. That's what we insist on. And just on Monday, they gave, both of them kind of released these statements saying this will in fact be their top issue. So the next issue is to keep pressing and pressing and saying, well, how will you do it? What are your ideas? Where will the money come from? What is the dedicated stream of funding? How will you negotiate, what will you trade in the give and take of politics to get a fair and full funding formula? Because we know if we can get that, it will make a huge difference, and that will be a place to at least start improving our schools. So I talked about the pillars of Power's work. The first is literally to build power, to get all these congregations to come together and work together. The second is to find opportunities at the policy level, and right now that opportunity is the fair, full funding formula with a dedicated stream of funding. The third way that we work in the schools is very hands-on in a local way, and I see, just want to thank so many Leyv-Ha-Ir, Heart of the City members for being here today, and I hope everybody will get to meet each other from our overlapping communities. But I see Beverly Hayden over here in the back. Beverly, would you stand up for a minute so people can see you? Is one of our leading forces on this very local school work, and I hope you will talk with her later about this. But Power identified 4 schools in different sectors of Philadelphia and said, well, we're going to go into these schools. They're connected to congregations that are part of our network, and we're just going to make a difference in these schools. And again, that's involved one relationship at a time, meeting with parents, meeting with the principal, meeting with teachers. What do you need? How could we make a difference? Really like asking the players who are most involved, what do you need? Well, it turned out that our school, we're in a consortium with a couple churches and a couple synagogues right here with the Spring Garden School, and what they needed was a library. And so this consortium took upon itself to raise the money and to start building a library there. Well, that led to looking at this space is actually very drab, sparkling clean, but just nothing there. And so now it's evolved into painting murals and bringing plants in. And this is our very hands-on level, because some people want to work at a policy level systemically, and some people want to see that they can make a difference today and affect a life today. And when a child walks in and has a book to read, you changed a life. So we, in Leyv-Ha-Ir, Heart of the City, we have people working on both those levels. We have people who show up for the policy discussions, the research meetings, the decision-making on the policy level, and we have people who literally go into this school, the Spring Garden School, and change children's lives. And Beverly's really been a key organizer of that, and other people have participated, and we were able to raise quite a bit of money to buy books for their school, and actually to give kids books over the summer to take home with them, which is like so incredibly heartwarming to actually see that you're putting a book in a child's hand who may not have been able to read a book over the summer. So between building power and entering this policy systemic change complex, and also doing this kind of hands-on work, Power is having a presence in the city of Philadelphia, and we will soon start working through denominational lines across the state to have a difference, we hope, at the state level in the upcoming election. And so that means like organizing through, for instance, we have Reconstructionist rabbis all across the state. There are Reform rabbis all across the state. There are Lutheran ministers all across the state. There are United Church of Christ congregations across the state. So each one reaching out to colleagues and organizing those communities. We're building power, sort of one person and one congregation at a time. So I think that's kind of in a nutshell what Power is doing. There are many, many opportunities to be involved. It's been a real privilege to get to know your leader, Hugh. What a great person. I have so much respect for him, and he's been coming to some of our meetings. He was at the last clergy meeting. And, really kind of finding ways that this community can work with Power and as it grows and develops. And that's exciting. And I hope we've seen a lot of Sharon Wallace, and I feel like our communities are beginning to overlap and grow together in these ways as we do this social justice work. So I'd like to leave a little room here for people to ask questions and for a little bit of dialogue. And I want to ask people to kind of reflect, because I've done so much talking about this, and I've really seen this phenomenon of what comes up is the despair and the critique. And I want to kind of shift us towards the positive sense of problem solving, looking for ways to take that first step with other people to make a difference and not rehearse the despair and the troubles, because we all know what's wrong with the schools, and we're right about that. But we don't need to talk about it anymore. What we need to do now is create solutions. So I'm going to open it up in just a minute and ask for questions and just comments. But first of all, I want to say I'm very grateful that there's such a good presence from the Leyv-Ha-Ir community here. Our president, Bobby Cohen, is here. Thank you, Bobby, and thank you so many people who have turned out and are here from both these communities. And I hope there will be a lot of time for people to intermingle and connect this morning. So yes.
A comment. It's always a good idea when you get into electoral politics to have a plan B. And I'm wondering, if you think about it, what do we do if Corbett gets reelected? What's our plan B?
Yeah. That's a really good comment. I mean, at this stage, what we need to really do, I mean, we are he was saying it's always important in electoral politics to have a plan B, what happens if Corbett gets reelected. Now, because we are a religious institution, we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we don't actually take a political position on which candidates get elected. What we do take a position on is which issues are being furthered, and that's what we really need to think about. What happens if these policies are not furthered? And that's a really good point. What is Plan B? John.
It's gotten to the point in our politics and our society that religion has always been associated with the most reactionary of politics, like anti-gay marriage, anti-abortion, etc. And that's what's turned a lot of people off from religion. Do you see this as showing that religion can be a positive, progressive force in society?
That's a really interesting question. I mean, I think our intention is to have both a prophetic voice and a strategic voice. You know, we don't just want to have the prophetic voice that has the vision that every child deserves an education. We also want to have a really concrete strategy that says, and here's how we are going to step by step get there. And I hope that the upshot is bringing progressive values into this realm. Yes?
The New Jersey Constitution provides for a thorough and efficient education of children. And a number of years ago, there was litigation, the result of which was that the New Jersey Supreme Court imposed upon a very reluctant state legislature the obligation of funding these impoverished districts. The Pennsylvania Constitution has a very similar provision. I wonder why no litigation has attempted to redress what we're talking about.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. There's so many different centers working on this, and I wonder if the Educational Law Center, which does that kind of litigation, has sort of things up their sleeve in that realm. I haven't asked that question, but that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, when I was a consultant to the Philadelphia school system, I was most impressed by the confirmation of the idea that everybody at every level feels totally helpless.
Right.
Children told me they were helpless because
Right.
the teacher had all the power. The teachers told me they were helpless because the principal had all the power. The principals told me they were helpless because the teachers had tenure, and besides which Dave Hornbeck had all the power. Dave told me he was helpless because the teachers had all the power, and besides which the school board had all, and so on and so forth. I went up to Harrisburg, I went to Washington. Everybody is totally helpless at every level of the system. How are we going to change that?
Yeah, you're really right about that. And, you know, one of the things we're saying is, look, this is a moral issue. Don't be helpless about it. You're a voting citizen. You have, you can show up. You can not just at election time, but we have had we may have seen in the news, we've had large demonstrations outside of 440 Broad Street, the education building, well covered by the press, just saying, you know, this can't continue like this. You've got to wake up and make some changes here. And so we can't think of ourselves as helpless and hopeless. We have a moral responsibility to figure out how to take that first step. And an organization like Power is trying to channel us into some positive things we can do, such as right now, focusing on this governor election and on getting this funding right. You know, if you say like it's too complicated, it's too intractable, and you just give up, you're kind of buying into that hopelessness and helplessness. And so part of what I think our ethical traditions can do is say, even though it's a big mess, it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to figure out the next step for you to do to take responsibility for fixing this. And it's big, and hopefully we can do it together. Yeah.
We have a board mic, I'd like to use that.
Oh, thank you.
Right?
Thank you.
Sound right?
I think so.
How much time?
I don't see much.
About 5 minutes?
I
8 minutes, okay.
I think part of the problem that we're facing is when we talk about these elections is that such a small segment of the population that's eligible to vote actually votes.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the problems we really have to address. If you look at what's going on in Washington right now in the Congress, and we keep sending these people back to Washington,
Yeah.
there's something wrong with the system when you only get 30% of the electorate out there voting. And I think that needs to be a major area of concentration.
That's a really, really good point. And so partly what we end up with is a civic engagement campaign, right? A civic engagement campaign to get people to be aware of the issues and to vote on the issues. And we're preparing for that this fall, but we'll be moving full force ahead with it starting in January with house visits, phone calls, knocking on doors, and getting people to turn out to support these kind of changes. If anybody's interested in that civic engagement piece of helping people find that kind of empowerment as voters, one of the city commissioners is going to be speaking on October 9th in the home of one of our congregants, a couple blocks from here on 19th Street. And we'll be talking about how do you do civic engagement? Like how do you reach out to your own neighbors and friends and make sure that everybody you know is registered to vote, aware of the issues in education, and going to get out there and vote. We need people to make phone calls, we need people to knock on doors. And that's really what you come down to. It's a really good point, because it's boots on the ground to get people engaged with being active citizens if you want to make these changes. Yeah.
Yeah, we know that the single most predictive indicator of a child's performance in education is the income of their parents. And if you look at the country that has the best educational record is Finland. Their poverty rate is 4% for the children. Our poverty rate is 25%. So ultimately, if that is the most predictive indicator, then somewhere in your program has to be a place for the income of the parents of the children moving up, and basically we're saying the elimination of poverty.
You are so right. And you know, Power also has a whole other strand of its work that has to do with living wage and job development. So that is a piece of it. But one thing that we're saying is that just because kids are poor, and we know that deeply, deeply affects their educational potential and possibilities, we're not going to write them off. We know it costs more money to educate poor kids. That's built into the funding formula, that a big poor city like Philadelphia is weighted in a different way than a rich suburb and needs more money to educate its kids. Many of them are immigrant kids who don't speak English. Many of them are living in poverty, getting free school lunch. You need more resources to educate kids in poverty, because poverty is a huge stressor. that leads to poor outcomes. So even we have a whole track that's building jobs, and you might have seen that this living wage issue will be on the referendum in this spring on our ballots. Another place that Power's really working to address the underlying issues about poverty. But even so, even if you're talking about poor kids, we're not writing off the education of poor kids. We're saying, let's address it. Let's bring the funding that we need. Let's commit. And we know poverty's a big problem, and nevertheless, these kids deserve an education, and we're going to stand for that, whatever it costs. Yeah.
I wonder if you could tell us the other three schools that you're
Ron,
on.
would you ask? You mentioned the great stuff you're doing in Spring Garden. What other schools are you working with?
The other
You said there were
schools,
3 other schools.
yeah, there are 3 other schools. One of them actually was on the closing list, so that's kind of, we'll figure out where we go with that one. But one of them is Nebinger, one of them is Blueford, and the other one, Fulton, was just on the closing list. It doesn't actually exist as a school because it was melded into another school, but our congregations are working with those families still, helping them make that transition into their new school. Yeah.
People over there.
Okay, yeah, Joel.
I'm very impressed with your description of the work that Power is doing. And I appreciate your emphasis on getting things done locally. I would consider simultaneously taking it in a completely different direction. That is to say, on the Republican side, they have an organization called ALEC. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Tell me about it.
It's an organization that comes up with model legislation for all the states. And then they disseminate it to, it's kind of a corrupt organization, really. But the thing is that we, on the Democratic side, don't have or the liberal side, don't have a counter organization that does similar things. What they're doing in the state government is a race to the bottom, basically. And it seems to me that at the same time that you're doing the work that you're doing, if you were to coordinate with other states, you would have a number of advantages. One is it would increase the possibility of funding, because you can have federal, you can have not federal, but you can have rich deep pockets contribute to this organization that would be disseminated according to the states. Another advantage is that you would be able to see model programs and model legislation from other states. So it seems to me that that would have great advantages, and I would consider simultaneously the work that you're doing to do that.
Good, thank you. Yeah. And behind him.
We will have a film on Alec, a Bill Moyer's film. For
Okay.
those people who want to know, and I was looking to see if it's in the program. It's not. It is announced in our newsletter for this month. It's coming up during
October
October.
20th, and Sylvia is heading that effort.
Oh, great. I think someone over here. And then,
When you negotiate with people, assuming you are negotiating, assuming that we're not talking strict cynicism, you have to understand their position, their needs, their aspirations. What do you think are the needs and aspirations of the people who seem to want to turn down the faucet on the Philadelphia school system?
yeah. I think that's a really good question. And I think we're in the stage right now of gaining a seat at the table, and the next stage is you sit there and you give and take and you work it out. So that's, we hope to arrive at that stage where we are in that negotiating place. We know there are many competing interests. People want low taxes. People want good education. There's lots of people want the shale oil in the ground. People want the free energy. The low-cost energy. There's lots of competing needs like that. So we want to lift up the education piece and have a seat at the table, and then we understand that there will be a give and take process as we figure out what solutions will be. And it's almost a stage kind of thing. Somebody over here.
Thank you. Very supportive of your work. I've been to some power meetings, and so I'm hoping down the road that there will be some sort of alignment. I know about your work also into other areas, and maybe you could give a quick capsule version of what you're doing on immigration issues and also on living wage and jobs issues as well.
The
They are doing
overall-
more than just the schools.
Thank you. Yes, we do. Our overall umbrella slogan is a city of opportunity that works for all. City of opportunity that works for all, and there are 3 different campaigns that are simultaneously unfolding. I told you about the education campaign, which just touches people's hearts, and there's so much energy, and I'll tell you some specific things that if you're energized about that, you can plug into. The second one has been this living wage campaign, and we started out with what was going on at the airport, because the airport's undergoing a $20 billion expansion over a 10 or 20 year period. It sort of remains to be seen. But we wanted to make sure that since that is Philadelphia's airport, we have to give agreement to these corporations that will make use of it and make a lot of money off it, that it will also benefit this city. And what this city needs is jobs for people who are sometimes borderline employable because they didn't get a good education. And so getting jobs for those people means funding education, funding coaching, having first sort of these policies where you first have to turn to a zip code with very low incomes to see if there are people there who could do the jobs before you open it up. And there's like a whole lot of kind of tried and true policies that would help break that cycle of no jobs, so people turn to drugs and gangs and violence, so people are in prison, so there are no parents at home to raise the next generation. We want to break that vicious cycle and have jobs for people, even if they are low literate and need some of the soft skills like knowing how to show up on time and be a worker. And we want to break that cycle with every support that's needed to help those jobs work, because we think that will uplift the entire city. We all will have a safer city. We all will have a city that starts a positive cycle towards working. So it's kind of like, put me to work and the city will work. We have t-shirts that say, put me to work and the city will work. So that's the second. We've got education, we've got the jobs campaign, it's a living wage campaign. And so that morphed into, after we focused on the airport, that's all we're done with, but that morphed into this referendum now that it will be on the ballot because of a lot of our lobbying and educating. It will be on the ballot that any employee hired by the city or by a contractor approved by the city will have to have at least a living wage. So every little bit makes a difference. The third campaign has to do with immigrant rights, welcoming people who are immigrants. And if you think about it, it's kind of a win-win thing, because as our population ages, we need people who are willing to take those personal care jobs and fairly low-level jobs, who immigrants new to our country, just like our ancestors once were, are willing to start at the bottom and work their way up. They just want the right to do that as legal participants in the system. So we have an immigration welcoming campaign as well, which is mostly happening at the national level, so we're just a player in that. And those are the 3. So I know my time is almost up here. In terms of next step things that anybody can do, we will post on our website, and I will also communicate it to your leader, and I'm not sure if there's some way to get that out because it's only about a week away, this October 9th House meeting, a block from here, about how to engage in civic engagement, getting people to vote through phone calls and knocking on doors or whatever. Very important. We also are having a house meeting campaign where we come to your home, you invite your friends, and we have a talk like this about power. And in fact, we have a PowerPoint as well that we can show on your wall if you'd like. And take questions and discuss it. Just because each one, it's a movement of relationships, and we need to just bring more and more and more people into this work. So if anybody's interested in either coming to a house meeting or having a house meeting at your home where you invite your friends, that's really what we're doing for the next 6 months. So October 9th is a date that has to do with voting, organizing people to vote, and these house meetings have to do with this kind of talk, but reaching out to more people to bring them into this work. If you check our website, we always list what's going on with Power. Power also has a website, www.powerphiladelphia. I forget if it's .com or .org, but you can just Google it, .org, and you can find it, powerphiladelphia.org. So thank you so much for including us in your platform. platform, and I really hope to see more faces involved in this work. And I hope these communities will meet and greet afterwards. Thank you so much.